Yeah, I'm just like curious. Like, what do you scale the DC? What do you scale the DC cosmology?
Irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant.
Oh, well, I was gonna say if you don't scale it past outer, then
What do you think
is
outer
it?
is?
What do you mean? It's according to the VSPW tiering system. Unless
No, it's
that's not
not.
what you're
It can
using.
be according to whatever the fuck I want it to be, actually.
Okay, so then you can just what are you adhering to? What system or standard are you adhering
I'm
to?
adhering to a system I can justify.
Yeah, like can you state it or declare it?
Oh, something outer is just some form of location. You're exterior to the primordial creation.
You're exterior to the primordial creation.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like, what do you mean? Like, can you qualify? What does it mean to be exterior? In what sense?
Exterior, that's pretty intuitive. What do you think? Like, exterior just means you're outside.
And
You're
what
existing and you're operating on a plane where primordial creation is just of null. It's of naught. And topologically outer would mean that you're interacting with these said concepts.
and so you just define this terminology, and you're not basing it off of anything in particular.
What do you mean
Okay,
I'm not basing it off of anything? Why do you think that?
No, I'm saying like you're not predicating it on any sort of like
You think you have to predicate it on some form of scholastic or lexical understanding for it to be justified?
well, justification is different than some sort of like inner accepted, like some sort of like intercepted, like a communal understanding or communal acceptance of a
I can give you
particular
some form
standard.
of idiosyncratic understanding of something and also justify it. Like that's that's how these logical processes
Wait,
are actually created.
hold on.
You know what syllogistic logic is, right? That's like the
Yeah,
very
you can have any
Mhm.
form of standard that you can justify in some way or
Mhm.
form, but typically standards are what we all collectively use.
But when you
in
say the word
influence.
typically, you understand that you're like abiding to some form of colloquial, right? And I don't have to abide to the colloquial.
You said you
Typically,
have to. You said you were using an idiosyncratic form of like a standard. That's fine. That's
I said
typically
no.
fine.
I said this could be the case, right? I'm just saying, like when you say the words typically, like you're obviously trying to go to something that's already standard within some like let's say the community, let's say the
That's what
category.
standard means, though, right? It's already widely
Well,
accepted as a
standard doesn't
standard.
have to. Well, standard and typical are a bit distinct in that same. Like when you say we're going to the typical standard, a standard doesn't have to be typical.
No, but that's kind of what it's baked in. That's the intuition when you say standard. So if I say I have a
But then,
standard,
I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm sorry, but like when you say intuition and then you say standard and then you say typical, we're going off some form of colloquial. Am I saying that word right? Oh my goodness, colloquial understanding of things. Like let's say syllogistic logic was made in the ancient. Syllogistic logic was made in the ancient time. This was for Aristotle or Aristotelian type of frameworks or Boolean frameworks, etc. And then propositional logic was made 1,000 years later. Now we have predicate logic, which is the type of shit that we use now. These things are distinct from one another, but they were all created. If like let's say the first ever time you heard about some propositional logic back in I don't know 2,000 years ago, you'd say this guy was yapping. You'd say exactly what you're saying to him, what you're saying to me now.
Okay, so to be clear, you can. Wait, hold on. Oh, did you pause? Oh, okay, wait, hold on. So to be clear, I'm not saying that like your logic. I'm not saying that your standard or like your definition of outer is wrong. I never contended. I'm just simply saying that when I'm coming here and I'm saying something like outer, it's pretty clear that you know what I'm talking about, right? It's pretty clear that I'm obviously inferring the VSPW tiering system. Now, if you want to invoke your own definition of outer, fine, just justify it. You're saying that like outer is just any character who exists prior or like beyond or outside of a particular cosmology or particular realm. Is that what you said? So
I would take.
realm?
So you want okay. So how do I do this? Like the source is just primordial creation. We agree with that, or would you like justification for that?
Okay, no, I'll just grant you that. So it's beyond time, and so like just be clear, primordial. You're saying it's beyond like time, or what are you saying when you say primordial?
The word beyond is not necessarily used when the term primordial is invoked. It's some form of thing that is the creation of these things, not beyond, but the creator, the father. Excuse me.
So you think that being beyond primordial is like sort of like just like the outer bounds of your cosmology. So it's like it's
Sure.
the final layer, sort of to speak.
Sure, if that's how you can understand it.
I mean, I'm asking you, so if you can just clarify.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, something something exterior to primordial creation is just going to be, by my definition, outerversal. That's where we start to contact. That's where we start to like invoke the terms like abstract or without composition.
Okay, so then, if something is beyond this sort of primordial boundary, what how do you sort of like reconcile two characters within that sort of satisfy this definition or satisfy your definition of outer, and they're pinned together? Who wins in this particular scenario?
I mean, that gets into the metaphysics. Can this character topologically interact with the other character who's also abstract without composition? It gets into some form of topological framework where we have to argue. But I usually
Wait, hold on a
like,
second. Without composition, wait, hold on. Without composition, is that a required necessary criteria in order to be beyond a primordial realm? Without
well,
composition.
to be beyond primordial existence, and you know, when we say primordial existence, we're talking about everything. When I say everything, let's use like some form of predicate logic. Like for all x, if x is everything, then therefore, using some form of conditional from the propositional, we're gonna say for all x, if x is everything, then it would be the case that x is also abstract and irreducibly simple.
Hold on, you can't have. Wait, hold on. When you think X is everything, do you mean everything as in like the set of every possible thing
Inside of primordial creation.
inside of primordial creation? And primordial creation encompasses everything, so there can't be anything beyond primordial creation. If you're using it from a sense of like, if you're using it from a sense of like of an absolute, right, where it's like this, where it's like primordial creation contains absolutely everything, including, like, for example, we'll take like an example like the set of like the absolute infinity, right? Well, then you can't actually have anything beyond that because
What do
you're
you think
then leading
abstracts
to.
are?
I think
What do you
like
think something abstract is?
if you're using it in like a philosophical, like sort of like platonic way, like an abstract is like sense of like an idea or like a form, like of like of a particular object, right? So we'll take, for example, like something like platonic concepts, right? Like the world of forms, right? If you're talking about something like that, like a transcendental, Immanuel Kant's transcendentals, if that's what you're obviously referring to. But again, I pushed on that terminology of composition because something doesn't need to be physical to have a composition. Again, I'm not saying you're saying this, but just to be clear, can you like clarify what you mean by composition? Because you're using this sound like predicate logic, but it's like I don't really see the inference in that. Like you're using predicate logic to say that, well, if X is this, and then like primordial thing is, or primordial encompasses X, which X represents everything. Well, I mean, like this is like okay, but I don't really see the inference here. Can you again like just elaborate on what you mean by composition? Because again, composition doesn't just mean physical; it's just uh, particular properties. Like ontology, for example. So just like
Okay, so when I mean that, like you're saying, okay, primordial creation is not necessarily bounded by the physical set of things, and outerversal by definition is outside of all compositional totalities. That's what I'm talking about.
define compositional totalities.
So, okay. So basically, what I mean by like contains or compositional totalities and whatever not, outerversal does not equal some form of compositional entity. So you're correct in the act of like, okay, not necessarily you're correct. So outerversal explicitly means outside of all dimensional, spatial, temporal, and structural frameworks. Anything outside of all frameworks cannot be composite or whatever not, right? Because
I disagree
composition
with that.
requires parts, relations, and a background structure to composite within.
Wait, hold on a second. You said in particular, you said spatio-temporal dimension, or spatio-temporal, and you said dimension, all form of dimensionality. So you're referring to like the physical. Do you think that composition does not cannot like exist within like metaphysical objects? Like you think like things like metaphysical objects or structures don't have compositions to it? Like what do you think? That's why I ask you. What do you think a composition is? Like you need to define what a composition, and actually not just composition, but also define what a like a total composition is, because you made a very clear distinction between those two terminologies. You haven't defined those. So what is a total composition or a composition totality? They're
My
very
bad.
different
Yeah,
things.
yeah, okay, of course. But composition absolutely can exist in some form of metaphysical objects, right? That's fine. That's not what we're talking about. It's kind of a category error. Outerversal objects cannot be compositional by definition, and I'll explain to you why that's the case. So you're conflating some form of metaphysical and with like some transstructural. That's the equivocation of that invalidates your objection in an aspect. And so you're so basically like metaphysical and outerversal. That's what you're claiming, right? Like those are the two terms you're trying to like invoke in an
No, I'm
aspect
not.
here.
I'm not evoking anything right now because you hold on. You just said that I made an error. So you just said that I'm making a false equivocation.
Yeah.
You're
So
saying
metaphysical
so.
does not
Explain
equal
that.
non-composite.
Yeah, okay, so you made the claim that something being metaphysical means that it doesn't have a composition, because that's what I'm questioning you on.
Yeah. Outerversal means beyond. Okay. The examples of these are just imagine like numbers, propositions, or possible worlds. Those are metaphysical and structured. Would you agree?
Hold on. You said. Hold on. Repeat what you said prior. You said numbers, numbers, and what?
Prior, I mean, that's exactly. Well, look at numbers, propositions, and possible worlds are all metaphysical and structured.
Okay, so they're prior to the physical world. So you're saying that like Kant's a priori, like Kant's transcendental, something like that. Then
Okay.
yeah, obviously. But to be
Okay. So
clear,
okay.
you
Yeah.
haven't
Okay.
defined composition
Hold on.
because you're
Yeah. Yeah.
using
I'm getting there.
composition
I'm
weird.
getting there. You agreed that these things are metaphysical and structured. That's fine. Okay. So if these things are metaphysically, or if these things are metaphysical objects, can have, so yes, like metaphysical objects can have composition, but the concession does not help you, right? That type of concession doesn't help you because outerversal does not equal some form of merely metaphysical, and outerversal equals outside of all structural totalities. Composition requires a framework, not just non-physicality. That's like
Okay,
non-negotiable in an
okay,
aspect.
hold
So
on.
yeah,
The
hold on.
conclusion,
I got you. For
yeah, just
composition to
define
exist,
composition. Yeah.
yeah, I'm okay. For composition to exist, you would need some form of distinct constitutes or constituents or like relations between them, like a background principle that distinguishes part from whole. Like basically the framework, that framework can be physical, mathematical, logical, or metaphysical, but it must exist. So when you say something is defined outside of all frameworks, outerversal, then what we're saying necessarily is that there is nothing for parts to be parts within. Therefore, composition is impossible.
Wait, hold on a second. Do you think that frameworks don't exist in the metaphysics? Okay, hold on. Let me ask a
I
very
didn't hear
blatant
anything you
question.
just said. I'm not
Hold
gonna
on.
lie.
Let me
Go
ask
ahead.
a very blatant question. That's a very explicit, blatant question. The classical laws of logic, right? We agree they're metaphysical. They're not. They don't exist in the world that a priori, right? In all possible worlds, they govern all possible worlds in a mobile sense, right? These things are the laws of logic are composited, or they're composed of different parts, i.e. LOE, right? Law of non-contradiction. They're two different things that make up the laws of logic. Do you agree with that?
Repeat the last part, please.
The classical laws of logic are a whole, right? That are made up. It's a conglomeration of different laws, right? Absolute axioms, right?
No,
These two things are fundamentally different from each other. Wait, hold on.
I don't agree. I don't agree. No,
How do
because
you not agree with it?
the laws of logic are not composite entities. They are abstract or ontologically simple principles. Like saying they're composed of like the
I
law
didn't
of
say they're
non-contradiction.
composed.
No,
I
listen.
never said
I'm
that.
hold on. Wait, what you said was the classical laws of logic, right? You said the classical laws of logic, they're metaphysical. They don't exist in the world that is a priori or in any or in all possible worlds. They come all possible in like the mobile sense or whatever modal sense.
And
Like
what I said specifically is that the classical laws of logic, as we defined it, is a set or a conglomeration of these different distinct laws. So classical laws of logic is the whole, and it is composed of these different
you
laws.
say
That's
it
what I'm
again.
saying.
Okay, don't
Yeah.
interrupt me
So
this time. Don't interrupt me because you just said it again. So saying they're composed of the law of non-contradiction or any other law is a misunderstanding of abstraction. Principles are fundamental patterns, not exaggerates or parts, right? You're like what you're basically trying to do is you're equivocating between conceptual distinctions and ontological compositions. The law of logic are abstract and not composite because the law of non-contradiction, law of identity, or what's the other one? Law of excluded middle, right? Those are in the indivisible like principles. They're structural of like reality and reasoning, not entities that contain parts. So saying the laws are composed of different laws confuses classification with composition. That's
okay,
let me give you an example before you go. Like
because
imagine I say saying a triangle is composed of three angles doesn't make the concept of a triangle a composite entity. The triangle is a singular abstract form. You get that, right?
okay. So to be clear, right? So we're on the same page. I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that the LOE is a compository thing, right? So I'm saying that LOE coupled with law of excluded middle, coupled with law of identity, creates the compository thing. So that's what you're disagreeing with, right? Because typically, I never made the claim that LOE in and of itself is a compository thing. So you're disagreeing with the statement that the classical laws of logic itself is a compository thing. That's why you're equivocating it to, or you're trying to use the analogy of the triangle. That's what you're saying, right? I'm trying to clarify. Now you're getting into a different depth because you're saying I just want you to repeat what you said with how you define something to be compository. Because like the triangle thing, I don't really understand. You can always break things down into different sets. I'm just curious. And also, I just need clarification on what exactly you're contending with.
My bad, but I heard what you said. Like, I was talking to somebody, but like, listen, like that's exactly the reason why this collapses, because like the problem is like, even if you couple multiple laws of logic conceptually, you're not creating a composite entity. So I don't understand how this like helps you in any aspect, and it's kind of like deteriorating or like
I don't
deterring from the
understand your
actual point.
contention, bro.
This is
Because
kind of like
even with your
obfuscating.
triangle thing, like definitionally, it is like a composite. Like it's a polygon. It is by definition a composition of three different
No,
angles.
because you can
Like, I don't-
conceptually identify angles, but the triangle is still a singular form, not a composite entity. Like that's
Wait, do you
similar to
think-
the LOE
Wait,
or
what?
conceptual
Wait,
frameworks. Like,
do you
it's not
think that
much-
just because something is composite is composited of different distinct objects, that means that it fundamentally can't be its own distinct thing?
Yeah, so
wait, hold on. What ontological rule does this break? What category can you point me to where something being made up of a composition of different distinct things means that it is in it of itself not a whole singular identity, or not a whole singular thing? Like, what ontological category or principle can you show me that points to this?
Are you aware of the principle of ontological identity?
Yeah, like, no, yeah, okay, yeah.
Okay, so listen. So something can be both distinct. Something can be both a distinct entity and consist of parts. Are you aware of that?
That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Okay,
That's what I'm positing.
So listen. There is no metaphysical rule like forbidding that, of course, right? So you're okay. The false dichotomy.
So what are you basing this off of? Is what I'm asking.
The false dichotomy that you're committing is composed, has to biconditionally or materially equal, not distinct, or some form of thing like that, right?
Wait, repeat what you said. Repeat what you said.
There's some form of material equivalence in your structure or your framework by saying composed has some biconditional to not distinct.
Composed has biconditional not distinct. I said that if something is composed, it is not distinct. That's what I said.
Oh my goodness. So listen, yes, bro. So listen.
I never made that claim. I never said. In fact, that is what I'm.
You're having a false dichotomy.
Hold on a second. I said that if something is composed, it is not a thing. That's literally what I'm arguing against. You're the one
you just said.
That's
you just said something is committed, and you just said if something's committed of different distinct objects, that means that it's fundamentally cannot be its own distinct thing. Like
what?
That's exactly what you said. Wait, hold on. Chill. I don't want to get muted. You want to put money on the rec? Did you said that?
But yeah, we hold on 10. To be clear, 10.
You want to put money on the rec? Let's put money on the rec because you deadass just said that. I'm not even trying to be disingenuous.
Hold on a second. 10. How would that make sense? You brought up the example of a triangle and said a triangle is made up of three distinct angles. Therefore, it is not a compository thing. It is made up of different. You made that claim. It is not self-serving for me to make that claim in the beginning. Like, let's ask chat. Doesn't even make any sense. I've been arguing with you this entire time.
Okay. We can put money on the VOD, and later I'll get you the VOD. Because you genuinely said that. But listen, let me attack the point.
Let me just. I literally told you. Classical laws of logic are made up of three distinct things, and they come together to create the classical laws of logic. This classical law of logic is a distinct thing, yet it is composed of different things. That's the argument I made. There's no way you think. Also, appeal to majority. I'm not appealing to majority, dumbass. The fuck is this guy talking?
Appeal to majority of doom? Is that what it is? No, it's fine. Fuck that. Like, ignore the chat. But like that's you said that. But let me attack the other point, because this is like still confusion, right? So listen, the problem why this is just not good, because like in your majority appeal, right? Okay, whatever. I don't even know why I said that. Like, why do tell MK to chill? But listen. So the conceptual grounding of distinct principles does not equal ontological composition. That's what you're trying to equivocate. Are you aware?
So hold on. Are you saying that I made that? Are you saying that I made that argument?
You're saying,
or are you saying? Hold on a second. Are you saying that I'm making that argument out of virtue of the nature of the argument that I'm making is adjacency?
Yes, okay. So listen.
That's what you're saying. Okay, like,
oh my god! Hold on. You're like, I'm sorry. You're so confused right now. I'm trying to like, you can't just keep on asking these weird ass questions. I'm not. It's not that I can't answer these questions. It's just like it feels like it's a bit of a moving of the goalpost a little bit.
I
But listen,
never did though, bro. Like I literally, I've been consistent this
all
entire time
right,
with that position,
you have
which is,
not. But listen,
I,
the classical laws of logic are abstract, abstract and ontologically simple entities, and treating them as like some form of composite is a category error. That's the problem we're having here. And let me explain before you interrupt. Conceptual distinctions do not equal some form of metaphysical parts, right? So conceptual grounding does not equal composition. So saying LOE, LNC, what's the L? Is it LID for the other one, right? Like that equals classical logic, right? LOE, LNC, LID, that equals classical logic, right?
mm-hmm.
Okay, so that labeling, all you're doing is just labeling a framework. They're not forming some form of composite entity in reality. Ontological composition requires parts that exist in some form of relational whole. Abstract principles do not exist inside each other. They exist as
They
independent,
don't.
simple entities.
Oh,
Like,
really? Okay, hold on a second.
can
This
I
is
give
so
you an
easy.
analogy before you
Wait,
go?
no, this is so easy. Hold
Let
on,
me give you
give
an
me 1
analogy
second.
before you
No,
go. Let me give you an analogy before you go. Shut up. Damn. So a dictionary has many words. You would agree, right?
mm-hmm.
So saying quote unquote these words together form the dictionary doesn't make the dictionary ontologically a composite of parts. It's a conceptual framework.
Okay, before I answer that real quick, right? Can you have the law of non-contradiction without the law of identity? This is a question.
Yeah, I agree. I think you. Yes, I think you can. My bad.
You fundamentally cannot. Like you can't. How do
Okay,
you
give
wait?
the
Hold on.
argument for that.
How do you prove that x equals x and not x without x existing?
How do you prove x equals x without x existing?
Yeah. How do you even infer that? How do you even infer anything without it existing?
So what your question is you're saying you like I think you can have the law of non-contradiction LNC without the law of identity LOI, right? Like these things are ontologically independent principles, like because one does not ontologically require the other. In the aspect of me saying,
You're just stating it. I'm asking. I asked you a
No,
question. Can you respond to the question?
I'm gonna get to it. Stop interrupting me. That's bad. So listen, let's get to the definition of these things so I can actually help you understand why you can. So nothing can be LNC. Nothing can be both. Nothing can both be and not be in the same in the same respect at the same time, right? And then LOI is just every entity is identical to itself, right?
LOI isn't just a, so this is the issue. LOI isn't just a classification of identity, or it isn't just like a marker of
Holy shit!
identity.
Classical logic just treats them as part of.
Hold on a second.
Wait,
LOI,
you're
no,
already
to be
agreeing.
clear, LOI is
Listen,
the
you're already
assertion of
agreeing that they're
existence.
treating them as part of systems. Like, okay, you're already agreeing that classical logic treats them as a part of a system, but the system's membership is conceptual and not ontological. So, in other words, let me help you out with this. Conceptual, we define as LNC and LOI together. Ontologically, one could posit a metaphysical framework where LNC is valid without LOI being exceptionally reframed. An analogy to help you is that you can have rules for quote unquote no two objects occupy the same space, the exclusion principle basically, without defining what an object is in full ontological terms. The
You
rule
see,
can
that's your
stand
issue.
independently.
Hold on, can I speak now? Because that's your issue. You're treating LOI as a marker of identification or as a qualifier. It's not a qualifier. LOI is literally the assertion or the assertion of existence itself. It isn't simply the fact that A equals A is a marker of identification so we can identify it and we can sort of like have a qualification or understand its nature. No, that's not just what it is. It is quite literally the assertion of existence. Without LOI, you don't exist. There is nothing to speak of. That's why there's no causation when you don't have LOI. That's why you fall into so many different paradoxes and collapses when you don't have LOI and you don't invoke LOI in a sort of like a worldview, like philosophical worldview, because you don't have any way to assert that something exists. So you saying that I can have two objects without identifying what they are is fundamentally wrong and is fundamentally a misunderstanding of what LOI is. No, hold on, don't just hold on.
Okay.
Do you understand? No.
Okay.
So listen. Before you talk about something else, address that specific
This argument doesn't help you in the overarching point because all.
Don't talk about the overarching point. Address that argument.
Wait. If we're not
Don't just run away from it.
what are we
Address
talking
the
about?
argument.
Wait, hold on. Don't do that. That's obfuscating and that'd be concession. Don't do that. So listen, let me explain to you why this is not helping you in the overarching point. Because treating LOI as an assertion of existence doesn't make the laws of logic composite, nor does it force some form of conceptual grounding into ontological composition. You're conflating some form of existent presupposition with composition, which is completely,
What?
those are completely separate categories. You're confused. So listen, I'll explain to you why you're confusing this thing. So listen. So LOI as the assertion of existence just means that whatever exists is identical, is self-identical. That is exactly what that means, right? So that does not imply that multiple laws must be combined into one composite entity. Ontological identity and compositional structure are orthogonal, or however you say that word. I forgot how to say that word. Are concepts, right? So basically, identity like equal x is x, right? And composition is x is made of y plus z. So like even if LOI grants or guarantees or grants some form of existence for abstract principles, it says nothing is said about whether multiple principles are a part of the single entity. An existent presupposition does not equal some form of combinatory requirement. Like LOI
Hey, like you're just not.
ensures
I don't know what to like. You just rambling
LOI
about something that's
ensures
just
that
not true.
LNC.
Dude,
Yeah,
you're just
yeah.
LOI was never. Well, you see, you're lost. LOI. I never made the argument that LOI is what's used to assert that composition. Or that was never the claim. The claim was that LOI, right? LOI is necessary in order for law of non-contradiction to
Wait.
occur.
You just
That's
conceded.
hold on.
Wait,
You see,
hold on.
you're
No. You
literally
just
just
conceded. You
like
just conceded. You just said
hold on.
that LOI does not prove some form of composition. You just conceded. If it's not composite, yo, we can move on to the actual scale. Can you scale your character?
That's
'Cause you already
literally
conceded
not
to
what
that.
I said. You're
Scale
just
your
lying. I
character.
never said that.
You just
lying.
said you're never. You just said that's not your
I
argument.
said that's not the
You
argument
just
that
said
I'm making.
you just said that's not
I
your
said that's not
argument.
the argument that I'm making.
Okay then.
I
So
said,
are
hold
you
on a second.
okay? So is the
Can I
overarching
talk?
point for you to get some form of composition?
Wait, hold on,
No.
can I talk?
Yes or
Can
no?
I talk?
Is
Wait,
the
hold on, can I
overarching
talk?
point? Is the overarching point for you to get
Yes,
some form
hold
of
on a
composition?
second. Hold on a second.
Okay,
Hold on a second.
justify the composition.
Hold on a second.
Goodness
Hold on a
gracious,
second.
you were horrible.
LOI is necessary. LOI. This is the point. This is the point you made. You made the point that hold on. You made the point that these laws, these logical laws, don't interact with each other. That's the point that you made. The point that I'm making is that no, that's factually false. LOI is necessary in order for law of non-contradiction to be inferred. That's the point that I'm making, because you can't affirm that any sort of particular distinct thing does not equal itself and not itself, because in order for that inference to happen, these things need to actually exist. That's the point. And so therefore LOI is necessary in order for law of non-contradiction to occur. That's the point. Therefore that actually proves that these classical laws of logic actually do interact with each other and are actually mingled. Therefore they create the because remember, your initial contention was that these laws do not interact with each other. Therefore do not satisfy whatever like weird whatever your qualification you have for something being a composition. That was your thing, and I refuted that, and you're not actually addressing it. So please address that point. LOI is necessary for law of non-contradiction to occur.
Okay,
Address that point.
Okay, shut up. Like this still fails.
Well, explain.
Because okay, shut up. So interaction, like listen, interaction or inferential dependency does not make or does not imply or entail some form of ontological composition. And I'll explain to you why. The fact that the laws of logic can be used together or that one presupposes the other for some form of inference does not make them the single composite entity, because you're claiming that LOI is necessary to infer LNC. Therefore, the laws interact, quote unquote. That's a category mistake. Interaction is epistemic or inferential, how we reason about them, right? Composition is ontological, how they exist. So, for example, let me give you another example because this is bad. Water interacts with oxygen, and hydrogen conceptually is chemical. Those are chemical formulas, right? So basically, that does not mean oxygen and hydrogen cease to exist as independent elements, or that the chemical formulas itself is composite in some form metaphysical term, or in that sense, right? So the inferential dependency is not ontological dependency. So listen, the laws of non-contradiction may require LOI to be expressed or recognized in formal logic. That is dependence in reasoning, not a metaphysical composition of parts. Outerversal entities or logical laws are ontological, like simple, or are ontologically simple, basically. So epistemic
You just
relations.
didn't understand the argument.
Epistemic. So you just saying I didn't understand. That's bad for you, gang. So epistemic relations between them do not like alter or after like.
Can I respond?
Their
Because like
simplicity.
you're just, I don't like, dude. I never look. Hold on. LOI is not so that law of contradiction can sort of express itself but exists independently. It's just that we can't access it. No, it's not just that. LOI is fundamental to the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction cannot be inferred and does not exist without LOI, as it is the LOI is necessary for law of non-contradiction. It's necessary. It isn't just that you can't, like, your water example doesn't even make any sense. Hydrogen and oxygen still exist independently of whether or not they're fused together to make water, right? The law of non-contradiction fundamentally does not exist without LOI. So these are fundamentally different things. They're not equivalent. You're making a false analogy right here, okay? You, and also further point, before in the beginning of your ramble, you said very clear, you made a you contradicted, or you lied, you just straight up lied. You said that these distinct things do not need to come together in order to form a composition. That was literally a lie, because you said earlier that they do. That's the whole point. That's the whole reason as to why I brought this up.
That's not what I said.
You quite literally did. Yes.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said. So listen.
Are you guys recording this, by the way? Because you can go back and you record.
You're
it.
horrible.
Are you guys recording
Listen. Let me, because that you're confused. So listen, you're basically making some form of claim that fails because the inferential dependence is not ontological composition. You're not making that connection. Goodness gracious, like, I don't know what book you studied, but you need a refund. So listen, you're insisting some form of LNC cannot exist without LOI. That's strictly an epistemic or inferential claim. LNC as a principle we can state or recognize requires LOI, but ontologically, LNC it as an abstract outerversal or principle exists independently as a simple entity. So basically, dependence is reasoning or expression. It is not some form of parts of another entity. It's like the hydrogen example, right? Your hydrogen little objection is irrelevant because the water example, it works because it's what we're trying to illustrate, right? So conceptual dependence, water, etc., does not equal some form of ontological dependence. Oxygen, hydrogen exist independently. Same principle goes for the conceptual recognition or recognition of, like, LNC may rely on LOI, but ontological existence of LNC does not require LOI as a part. You're equivocating between epistemic access and existential grounding. Please give me an argument that justifies this fucking material equivalence.
Can you define or just like sort of sort of demonstrate or just like elaborate on your definition or your qualification of ontological existence? Because the way you're using it is very loosey, wishy-washy. Just to elaborate on it.
I'm not gonna lie, like these little rebuttals, like rhetorical slabs.
They're not rhetorical slabs.
These are horrible because you're not tracking at all. I'll define it for you, but don't think like that's bad. That's bad.
It's not. It's, you know what's funny? It's not even a retort. It's not even a retort.
It definitely is a rhetorical tactic. But listen. Okay, shut up. Ontological. You asked for ontological existence, right? You understand that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not loose, and you saying it's loose is just another rhetorical without actual objection. But listen, it's a precise understanding, and I'm giving you a precise definition because it refers to what actually exists as a distinct entity in reality, independent of our concepts, inferences, or recognition. Like, what you're trying to say is you're conflating some form of epistemic accessibility with the ontological status. That's the problem, and I'm asking you to give the material equivalence between those two things, but you're dodging and obfuscating, which is exactly the confusion that we're having here, or that you're having here, because composite claims, right? So I can define it even further. So the definition of existence just means X exists if X has being in reality, independent of whether anyone observes, infers, or reasons about it. The key points of this, and like the key ways you can understand this, in the ways that we can, like, just like, let's say, like, imagine some bullet points in your head, bro. Let's say bullet point 1 is just existence and is like independent of like recognition or recognition, something that can exist even if no one knows about it. And like, number 2 would just be existence is independent of like conceptual grounding. X exists on its own, not because of like not because it's like combined with Y. And 3 would just be existence is independent of inferential necessity, basically. Like examples of like needing LOI to infer LNC does not create existence. Rebuttal, please.
I genuinely don't even like. I don't even.
That's bad for you.
Yeah, that was like literally just like.
Yeah, use your earlobes here. Anybody else like with actual brain can come up here? Goodness gracious, you're a horrible debater. We can get somebody competent to judge, because I don't think you have any competent friends. Because oh my goodness, this nigga like got stun locked immediately.